If you're looking for a fun and really good Spellblade Mage build for the first 20 levels of the game, then let me help you out. This is my build guide. We'll also go over a bunch of items you can use and go through the skill tree. So if we come over to our skills, you will see we have 24 points available to spend. And let's jump straight in. So we start with our Mage Core, and we're going to take the first node up here to Mind Blast. This is a really nice early level spell. Yes, it costs 50 mana, which is similar to some of the other features, but this is a very, very good defensive-based spell to start the game with. You're going to go south, and we're going to take Quick Recovery. Mana Regeneration restarts 25% faster when paused by spending mana or taking damage. Anytime we can get faster mana is always a good thing. We're then going to come to Chain Lightning. Now, Chain Lightning is a really good early level spell. It does also work mid-game as well, however, I do think you can upgrade this, so bear that in mind. We're going to come north, and we're going to take Fade Conduit, maximum mana plus 50. This means you can cast more of your spells more often. More maximum mana, more abilities you can stack, and then you can just pump out. And with some of the crit rates we have and stuff, if you do this, you can just diminish bosses' health bars. We're going to continue north to Elemental Catalyst. Abilities gain 15% bonus damage based on the damage type of your staff and orb weapon, which means if you have a lightning orb and you cast a lightning spell, 15% bonus damage. Same with fire, same with cold. An amazing ability to use. From Elemental Catalyst, you're going to come back down to Chain Lightning, and we're going to go south to Concentration. Charged attack damage plus 10%. If you have your staff and you do your charged heavy attack, this is a great way to stack up necrosis, burning, all sorts. 10% extra damage on top of that, cannot argue with. We continue down the node to hit Energy Burst. So abilities that deal fire or electric damage increase the other type's damage by 15% for 10 seconds, which means you can have a lightning orb and a fire staff or vice versa, do one of your abilities, switch your weapon, and you'll be dealing extra damage for 10 seconds with the other weapon. This build is fire and lightning damage based, so bear that in mind. After that, we come straight down here, and we take Bulwark. Physical resistance plus 10%, because honestly, the taunting and tanking abilities for your companions in this game kind of suck. So more physical resistance is perfect, because you will pull aggro a lot. After that, we come to Perfect Defense. Now, we don't really want this weapon, or sorry, this ability, but it can be helpful if you do land a Perfect Defense, get that shocking weapon. But what we're really after is Underestimated. Light attack damage versus health plus 10%. Just a nice general passive to boost your attack. Continuing downwards we go. Baleful Blast. Upgrades blast abilities. Blast abilities deal critical hits to enemies with low health. Now remember that because we do have a load of blast abilities. But we're going to come here for Storm Surge. Now this is my upgraded version of Chain Lightning. It obviously doesn't spring around, but because of how often you will pull aggro, because the damage output you're doing, this is a nice way of not only coming backwards, but you can also deal damage, and it implies Overwhelm, which means if you have a character with you that can detonate this, even more damage on top. Now after that, we are going to come to the right, and we're going to take Shellbreaker. Damage versus armor plus 20%. So you notice between our passives, we now have extra damage versus armor and extra damage versus health bars. Going to come down to the left again for the middle to take Spirit Blade. Now we're not really interested in Spirit Blade, but we need it to get into the Spellblade. If at this point you are following this and you don't have enough levels yet to get into the Spellblade specialization, that's perfectly fine. You're going to follow this path down here until you reach the number of points you need. So I'll do that now for you, and we're going to take Finale. Final attack damage plus 10%. Again, another great passive to boost our attack. We're going to take Elemental Executioner. Final attacks are critical against enemies with low health. Again, pair this with our other attacks. We do critical hits with like blast attacks when the enemy's at low health. And again, just pumping out more damage and rewarding us for chipping down their health ASAP. We're going to come down here to Demolisher. Maximum Arcane Bomb stacks +1. Now Arcane Bomb is built up thanks to your Dagger and Orb, and because you will be using that a lot in this build, that's what you want. Now bear in mind, once you get to the point of being level 20, you could come back up here and do this skill tree here. I will be doing that at the end of this build, just to make it more cohesive. But at any point you reach level 20 and you want to dip into the Spellblade specialization, just pause this part of the video, come back to this bit here, and then continue the video for this bit. Now from the ability here of Demolisher, we are going to jump to Meteor. This is a great blast spell. It's amazing. And it detonates Sunder, which means you have more synergies you can do between this and between your Storm Surge. You can have some really nice pairings. So we're going to take Meteor. And from that, we're going to take to the right, once I actually select it. And we're going to take Wildfire, fire damage plus 10%. Because remember, this build is fire and lightning based. Now, as I said, we are going to go into specialization for Spellblade, and we're going to take Thunderous End. 2,200 electricity damage, deals heavy damage and applies 2 stacks of shocked. After that, we're going to dip down here to the Void Blade. This is another blast effect. Detonates Sunder, and it's just such a great spell. Another big AoE, massive attack, and it deals damage twice. And then once you've got that, we are going to take Deterioration for penetration plus 15%, and we're going to take final attack damage plus 10%. Now, that still leaves you 1 point left to spend, and ideally, you're going to want to kind of look into these here. So blast abilities cost 50 less mana, and if you remember, our blast abilities were Void Blade and Meteor, which means instead of costing 100 mana, as you see the 2 little dots, only half as much, which means you can cast more of them. And if you remember, thanks to one of our spells here, maximum mana plus 50, we can stack up more of these, meaning you can cast even more as you go through. So that is our skill tree all done for that. If we come to our character, let me show you the abilities we're using. So for an orb, I'm using the Ethereal's Ash plus 3. Now for the items, use as many as you can. You want to try and pick the orbs as best as you can here that have the similar stats to what I'm using. Now bear in mind, I have just rushed through the main story to get to this point. So if you actually take the time to explore all the other areas, you'll probably have versions of these weapons that you can upgrade even higher than this to activate these key features you see, like the 25% burning duration. But essentially, 158 fire damage, 99 stagger, but plus 25 burning duration, and burning enemies deal 25% less damage for the duration. And because we have so many fire abilities, this is amazing. Now, for the dagger, we're using the Time-Worn Mage Knife, 218 physical damage, 104 stagger, but most importantly, 20% Arcane Bomb trigger damage, and eventually triggering an Arcane Bomb now also staggers enemies around your target. For a staff, we are using the Spirit Cooler. Now, I haven't found a really good lightning staff personally. There are a few options. If I come into my thing here, Shocking Branch is amazing, but because I haven't got it upgraded enough, I'm not using it. But this is what I would use. This would be the staff. Plus 20% final damage attack. That's already combined, that's already with the extra 10%, so it'd be 30% extra final attack damage with our light attacks. And eventually deal 40 damage with, 40 plus added electricity damage. This would be the staff to go for personally, the Shocking Branch. The only reason I'm using the Spirit Cooler is the 30 defense. As I said, the AI is not very good at pulling aggro. You will pull the most aggro. 30 defense really does help. For a hat, we're using the Kashrus Double Hat. Now, eventually, 15% mana generation, which means more mana, more spells being able to do, and 25% stagger on ability use. Stagger means you can do your finishing moves, your takedowns as they're called, and they do mass damage. For your armor, we are using the Jumper's Deft Leathers. So, 35 defense, 45% ability damage, and eventually 15 maximum mana, which means we're just stacking up extra, and 15% mana generation. These two combined, that is 30 mana generation eventually. For items, we are using the Tincture Kit, so plus 20% healing effects. The All-Mother's Copse, plus 20% blast ability damage, and if you remember, our blast abilities were indeed Meteor and the Spirit Knife, or sorry, the Void Blade as they call it. So your two big moves, your fire and lightning ones, this item will combine with those very, very nicely and give you 20% extra damage. And eventually 25% extra damage versus barriers. We're using the Glacial Talus plus 6 mana on a kill and eventually 15 mana generation, which means you will have 45 mana generation once you have upgraded all of this. And the Brass Root, plus 20% shocked damage, and then eventually 20% damage versus shocked enemies. And don't forget, Void Knife adds shock damage, so between these, not only are you doing 20% extra damage with your Void Knife, you're then doing another 20% on top with your other attacks because they'll be shocked thanks to that. So, with your abilities, our abilities we are using are as follows. We're using Void Blade, obviously. As I said, I spoke about this a lot, it's amazing. We are using Storm Surge. Like I said, this is a bit of an upgrade on our Chain Lightning. Using Meteor, because this is a great ability. And then we're using Thunderous End as our ultimate. Really, really good spells. Now there are a bunch of runes you could put on your item too. I haven't gone over them here, but let me show you. So for runes, for your knife I'd put 25% stagger. Now for your rings, I haven't got the Caretaker upgraded enough yet, but I would put at the very early stage, because you should be at rank 4 if you actually do some of the side content too, I would put the mana regeneration on one and the mana generation on the other, because that would be perfect. For the Spirit Call, I would take the armor damage, 20%, because as I said, with your heavy attack, you can hit a lot of enemies, and as you get to sort of like the point you are level 20, you will find a lot of enemies have armor and they will come at you. This is a nice way of just chipping away at loads of armor all in one go. For your helmet, I would put the fire resistance, and for your armor, I'd put the electricity resistance. Reason being is that there are certain skills where you can turn your resistances into damage as well, and that is something that you probably want to dip into as you take this build further. For your orb, I would put 10% weapon damage just to really buff it up, especially those light attacks because we have so many buffs already. And then eventually with your amulet, you're probably going to want to go with your ultimate damage plus 25%. Okay, so we have some combat, so let's show it off, and this is our Arcane Mark. Amazing. Switch our weapon. Get our dodge. There we go. Now if we show off some of our abilities, we have our Spirit Blade, which I somehow missed. But we also have a Meteor, and as you can see it only uses one essence of our mana, like I said. And that is the gist of this build. You're just going to wallop enemies, build your mana up. As you can see, our mana regeneration is already filling really quickly. So, lots of mana, lots of abilities, and just raining down fire and lightning damage. For example, if you use your Spirit Blade, or your Void Blade as it's called, then your Orb and Dagger, if I switch correctly, these fire attacks will then do extra damage thanks to our abilities and all sorts. And it's just an amazing build to help you get through the game ASAP. Or not even ASAP, but to just wallop enemies into submission. So if you've enjoyed this build, let me know in the comments below. What other items would you use? What other skills would you take? Where would you take this further? If you're new and you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel for more Dragon Age The Veilguard content. I am doing live streams of it, daily episodes, build guides for the early game and into the late game, as well as theme builds such as a Grey Warden tank and all sorts. So subscribe for more, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.